Peace, love, and light, family. It's your girl, Morgan Renee Myers, tuning in with you all for another reading of Black Boy by Richard Wright. We are now in chapter 10. Before I get started, I want to do some quick promo because I always forget. So these earrings that I have on are by my good friend Tyamika Mabry. She is one of the artists in my book, The Celibacy Chronicles, which you can find online at Amazon.com. This is the original first edition version. Let me see if I can find the painting she did. She did a piece in she did a painting to one of my poems in my book called Sangria Sorrows. And I feel like these earrings kind of resemble that. So this is her painting. This is a woman in a wine glass. The grapes are her hair. That's the, and then it's all going into like spiraling into this little drain. So yeah, Tyamika made my earrings. She does a lot. She's an artist. She does murals. She makes, painted jewelry and stuff like that. I've been crocheting, getting ready for fall. So I've been using up my scrap yarn to just make different beanies, and then I have some regular solid colored beanies as well, getting ready for homecoming, A&T, UNCG, school colors and things of that nature. I made a scrap yarn scarf, so getting ready for the cold because it's going to sneak up on us maybe down in North Carolina. You can never tell. So if you aren't following me on my Instagram page, make sure you check me out. It is Moremy, M-O-R-E-M-Y with 2 underscores, and you'll see the red logo of mine with the M inside of it, the yellow M inside of it. So that's enough promo. About to hop into this book. Peace and love. Peace and love. Everybody out there tuning in. Okay, so the last chapter, young Richard, he's growing up. He's about 17. He's trying to find jobs to support himself so that he can move from down south and go up north where he feel like life will be a little bit easier on him, because he just cannot get assimilated to the south, and he's born in the south. But between his personality, his mouth, his dreams of being a writer, the south, and the racism that takes place is just not for him. So in the last chapter, we see 2 different jobs that he had. One was working in some type of shop. I don't know if it was like a retail clothing shop or whatever, but he saw like his own people get abused by the white store owners. Like if people was late on making their payments or whatever, he drug one woman in the back. She came out all scruffed up. One time his tire blew out and some white guys rolled by and offered him a ride, and he didn't say yes sir, and they hit him in the face with a empty liquor bottle, and a police interrogated and terrorized him. Then he was working for an obstetrician, eye doctor, and that guy was a Yankee, so I guess he was from up north. So his employees were treating Richard wrong, and felt like he should acknowledge them as sir, and not just by their name. So he's got a lot going on. So now we're in chapter 10, and we're gonna see how life is panning out for little Richard. For weeks after that, I could not believe in my feelings. Let me read the last maybe few segments of chapter 9 so we can understand where we at. So I waited, and my roused senses grew slowly calm. I'm awfully sorry about this, he said. I had hoped for a lot from this job, I said. I wanted to go to school, to college. I know, he said. He's talking to the manager when he's leaving the obstetrician's office. He's quitting. I know, he said. But what are you going to do now? My eyes traveled over the office, but I was not seeing. I'm going away, I said. What do you mean? I'm going to get out of the South, I breathed. Maybe that's best, he said. I'm from Illinois. Even for me, it's hard here. I can do just so much. He handed me my money, more than I had earned for the week. I thanked him and rose to leave. He rose. I went into the hallway, and he followed me. He reached out his hand. It's tough for you down here, he said. I barely touched his hand. I walked swiftly down the hall, fighting against crying again. I ran down the steps, then paused and looked back up. He was standing at the head of the stairs, shaking his head. I went into the sunshine and walked home like a blind man. I appreciate the fact that Richard Wright keeps his dignity throughout this, no matter the racism or where he at on the totem pole in life, he always kept his dignity. I appreciate that about him. And I feel like a lot more of us should stand up for ourselves and what we believe in. Alright, so we're into chapter 10. For weeks after that, I could not believe in my feelings. My personality was numb, reduced to a lumpish, loose, dissolved state. I was a non-man, something that knew vaguely that it was a human, but felt that it was not. As time separated me from the experience, I could feel no hate for the men who had driven me from the job. They did not seem to be individual men, but part of a huge, implacable, elemental design toward which hate was futile. What I did feel was a longing to attack, but how? And because I knew of no way to grapple with this thing, I felt doubtlessly cast out. I went to bed tired and got up tired, though I was having no physical exercise. During the day, I overacted to each event, my banked emotions spilling around it. I refused to talk to anyone about my affairs because I knew that I would only hear a justification of the ways of the white folks, and I did not want to hear it. I lived carrying a huge wound, tender, festering, and I shrank when I came near anything that I thought would touch it. But I had to work because I had to eat. My next job was that of a helper in a drugstore, and the night before I reported for work, I fought with myself, telling myself that I had to master this thing, that my life depended upon it. Other black people worked, got along somehow, then I must get along, and so I could get my hands on enough money to leave. I would make myself fit in. Others had done it. I would do it. I had to do it. I went to the job apprehensive, resolving to watch my every move. I swept the sidewalk, pausing when a white person was 20 feet away. I mopped the store, cautiously waiting for the white people to move out of my way in their own good time. I cleaned acres of glass shelving, changing my tempo now to work faster, holding every nuance of reality within the focus of my consciousness. Noon came and the store was crowded. People jammed to the counters for food. A white man behind the counter ran up to me and shouted, "A jug of Coca-Cola, quick, boy." My body jerked taut and I stared at him. He stared at me. "What's wrong with you?" "Nothing," I said. "Well, move. Don't stand there gaping." Even if I had tried, I could not have told him what was wrong. My sustained expectation of violence had exhausted me. My preoccupation with curbing my impulses, my speech, my movements, my manner, my expressions had increased my anxiety. I became forgetful, concentrating too much upon trivial tasks. The men began to yell at me, and that made it worse. One day, I dropped a jug of orange syrup in the middle of the floor. The boss was furious. He caught my arm and jerked me into the back of the drugstore. His face was livid. I expected him to hit me. I was braced to defend myself. "I'm going to deduct that from your pay, you black bastard," he yelled. Words had come instead of blows, and I relaxed. "Yes, sir," I said. What is this word? Placatingly? Hold on, y'all know I gotta look it up. Placatingly? Let's see. How you say this word? Okay, Placating. Let's see. Placating. Intended to make someone less angry or hostile. So placatingly. Yes, sir. I said placatingly or less hostile. It was my fault. My tone whipped him to a frenzy. "You goddamn right it was," he yelled louder. "I'm new to this," I mumbled, realizing that I had said the wrong thing, though I had been striving to say the right. "We're only trying you out," he warned me. "Yes, sir. I understand," I said. He stared at me, speechless with rage. Why could I not learn to keep my mouth shut at the right time? I had said just one short sentence too many. My words were innocent enough, but they indicated, it seemed, a consciousness on my part that infuriated white people. Saturday night came and the boss gave me my money and snapped, "Don't come back. You won't do." I knew what was wrong with me, but I could not correct it. The words and actions of white people were baffling signs to me. I was living in a culture and not a civilization, and I could learn how that culture worked only by living with it. Misreading the reactions of whites around me made me say and do the wrong things. In my dealings with whites, I was conscious of the entirety of my relations with them, and they were conscious only of what was happening at a given moment. I had to keep remembering what others took for granted. I had to think out what others felt. I had begun coping with the white world too late. I could not make subservience an automatic part of my behavior. I had to feel and think out each tiny item of racial experience in the light of a whole race problem, and to each item I brought the whole of my life. While standing before a white man, I had to figure out how to perform each act and how to say each word. I could not help it. I could not grin. In the past, I had always said too much. Now I had found it was difficult to say anything at all. I could not react as the world in which I lived expected me to. That world was too baffling, too uncertain. I was idle for weeks. The summer waned. Hope for school was now definitely gone. Autumn came, and many of the boys who held jobs returned to school. Jobs were now numerous. I heard that hall boys were needed at one of the hotels, the hotel in which Ned's brother had lost his life. Should I go there? Would I, too, make a fatal slip? But I had to earn money. I applied and was accepted to mop long, white-tiled hallways that stretched around the entire perimeter of the office floors of the building. I reported each night at 10, got a huge pail of water, a bushel of soap flakes, and with a gang of moppers, I worked. All the boys were Negroes, and I was happy. At least I could talk, joke, laugh, sing, say what I pleased. I began to marvel at how smoothly the black boys acted out the roles that the white race had mapped out for them. Most of them were not conscious of living a special, separate, stunted way of life. Yet I knew that in some period of their growing up, a period that they had no doubt forgotten, there had been developed in them a delicate, sensitive, controlling mechanism that shut off their minds and emotions from all that the white race had said was taboo. Although they lived in had been developed in them a delicate, sensitive, controlling mechanism that shut off their minds and emotions from all that the white race had said was taboo. Although they lived in an America where in theory there existed equality of opportunity, they knew unerringly what to aspire to and what not to aspire to. Had a black boy announced that he aspired to be a writer, he would have been unhesitatingly called crazy by his pals. Or had a black boy spoken of yearning to get a seat on the New York Stock Exchange, his friends, in the boy's own interest, would have reported his odd ambition to the white boss. There was a pale yellow boy who had gonorrhea and was proud of it. "Say," he asked me one night, "you ever had to clap?" "God, no," I said. "Why do you ask?" "I got it," he said matter-of-factly. "I thought you could tell me something to use." "Haven't you been to a doctor?" I asked. "Aw, hell, them doctors ain't no good." "Don't be foolish," I said. "What's the matter with you?" he demanded of me. "You talk like you'd be ashamed to clap." "I would," I said. "Hell, you ain't a man unless you done had it 3 times, he said. "Don't brag about it," I said. "'Tain't worse than a bad cold," he said. But I noticed that when he urinated, he would grab hold of a steam pipe, a door jamb, or a windowsill, and strain with tear-filled eyes and a tortured face as though he was attempting to lift the hotel up from its foundations. I laughed to cover my disgust. When I was through mopping, I would watch the never-ending crap games that went on in the lockers, but I would never become interested enough to participate. Gambling had never appealed to me. I could not conceive of any game holding more risk than the life I was living. Curses and sex stories sounded round the clock, and blue smoke choked the air. I would sit, listening for hours, wondering how on earth they could laugh so freely, trying to grasp the miracle that gave their debased lives the semblance of a human existence. Several Negro girls were employed as maids in the hotel, some of whom I knew. One night, when I was about to go home, I saw a girl who lived in my direction, and I fell in beside her to walk part of the distance together. As we passed the white night watchman, he slapped her playfully on the buttocks. I turned around, amazed. The girl twisted out of his reach, tossed her head saucily, and went down the hallway. I had not moved from my tracks. "Nigger, you look like you didn't like what I did," he said. I could not move or speak. My immobility must have seemed a challenge to him, for he pulled his gun. "Don't you like it, nigger?" "Yes, sir," I whispered with a dry throat. "Well, talk like it then, goddammit." "Oh, yes, sir," I said with as much heartiness as I could muster. I walked down the hall, knowing that the gun was pointed at me, but afraid to look back. When I was out the door, my throat felt as though it were swelling and bursting with fire. The girl was waiting for me. I walked past her. She caught up with me. "God, how could you let him do that?" I exploded. "It don't matter. They do that all the time," she said. I wanted to do something, I said. You would have been a fool if you had, she said. But how much do you feel? They never get any further with us than that if we don't want them to, she said dryly. Yes, I would have been a fool, I said, but she did not catch the point. I was afraid to go to work the following night. What would the watchman think? Will he decide to teach me a lesson? I walked slowly through the door, wondering if he would continue his threat. His eyes looked at and through me. Evidently, he considered the matter closed, or else he had had so many experiences of that kind that he had already forgotten it. Out of my salary, I had begun to save a few dollars for my determination to leave. Had not been lessened. You said today we say, yes, you got a fat ass. Right. Some of them still slap ass on the way by now. Out of my salary, I had begun to save a few dollars for my determination to leave. Had not lessened, but I found the saving exasperatingly slow. I pondered continuously ways of making money, and the only ways that I could think of involved transgressions of the law. No, I must not do that, I told myself. To go to jail in the South would mean the end, and there was the possibility that if I were ever caught, I would never reach jail. This was the first time in my life that I had ever consciously entertained the idea of violating the laws of the land. I had felt that my intelligence and industry could cope with all situations, and until that time I had never stolen a penny from anyone. Even hunger had never driven me to appropriate what was not my own. The mere idea of stealing had been repugnant. I had not been honest from deliberate motives, but being dishonest had simply never occurred to me. Yet, all about me, Negroes were stealing. More than once I had been called a dumb nigger by black boys who discovered that I had not availed myself of a chance to snatch some petty piece of white property that had been carelessly left within my reach. How in the hell you going to get ahead? I had been asked when I had said that one ought not steal. I knew that the boys in the hotel filched whatever they could. I knew that Griggs, my friend who worked in the Capitol Street jewelry store, was stealing regularly and successfully. I knew that a black neighbor of mine was stealing bags of grain from a wholesale house where he worked, though he was a stanch deacon in church and prayed and sang on Sundays. I knew that the black girls who worked in white homes stole food daily to supplement their scanty wages, and I knew that the very nature of black and white relations bred this constant thievery. No Negroes in my environment had ever thought of organizing, no matter in how orderly a fashion, and petitioning their white employers for higher wages. The very thought would have been terrifying to them, and that was what the very thought would have been terrifying to them, and they knew that the whites would have retaliated with swift brutality. So, pretending to conform to the laws of the whites, grinning, bowing, they let their fingers stick to what they could touch, and the whites seemed to like it. But I, who stole nothing, who wanted to look them straight in the face, who wanted to talk and act like a man, inspired fear in them. The Southern whites would rather have had Negroes who stole, worked for them, than Negroes who knew, however dimly, the worth of their own humanity. Hence, whites placed a premium upon black deceit. They encouraged irresponsibility, and their rewards were bestowed upon us blacks in the degree that we could make them feel safe and superior. My objections to stealing were not moral. I did not approve of it because I knew that in the long run it was futile, that it was not an effective way to alter one's relationship to one's environment. Then, how could I change my relationship to my environment? Almost my entire salary went to feed the eternally hungry stomachs at home. If I saved $1 a week, it would take me 2 years to amass $100, the amount which, for some reason, I had decided was necessary to stake me in a strange city. And God knows anything could happen to me in 2 years. I did not know when I would be thrown into a situation where I would say the wrong word to the wrong white man and find myself in trouble. And above all, I wanted to avoid trouble. For I feared that if I clashed with whites, I would lose control of my emotions and spill out words that would be my sentence of death. The time was not on my side, and I had to make a move. Often, when perplexed, I longed to be like the smiling, lazy, forgetful black boys in the noisy hotel locker rooms with no torrential conflicts to resolve. Many times I grew weary of the secret burden I carried and longed to cast it down, either in action or in resignation. But I was not made to be a resigned man, and I had only a limited choice of actions, and I was afraid of all of them. A new anxiety was created in me, but my desire to leave to leave quickly. I had now seen at close quarters the haughty white men who made the laws. I had seen how they acted, how they regarded black people, how they regarded me, and I no longer felt bound by the laws which white and black were supposed to obey in common. I was outside those laws. The white people had told me so. Now, when I thought of ways to escape from my environment, I no longer felt the inner restraint that would have me stealing impossible, and this new freedom made me lonely and afraid. My feelings became divided. In spite of myself, I would dream of a locked cupboard in a nearby neighbor's house where a gun was kept. If I stole it, how much would it bring? When the yearning to leave would become strong in me, I could not keep out of my mind the image of a storehouse at a nearby Negro college that held huge cans of preserved fruits. Yet fear kept me from making any move. The idea of stealing floated tentatively in me. My inability to adjust myself to the white world had already shattered a part of the structure of my personality and had broken down the inner barriers to crime. The only thing that now stood in the way was lack of immediate opportunity, a final push of circumstance, and that came. I was promoted to bellboy, which meant a small increase in income, but I soon learned that the substantial money came from bootlegging liquor to the white prostitutes in the hotel. The other bellboys were taking these risks, and I fell in. I learned how to walk past the white policeman with contraband upon my hip, sauntering, whistling like a nigger ought to whistle when he is innocent. The extra dollars were coming in, but slowly. How could I get my hands on more money before I was caught and sent to jail for some trivial misdemeanor? If I were going to violate the law, then I ought to get something out of it. My larcenous aims were modest. $100 would give me temporarily more freedom of movement than I had ever known in my life. I watched and waited, living with the thought. While waiting for my chance to grab and run, I grew used to seeing the white prostitutes naked upon their beds, sitting nude about their rooms, and I learned new modes of behavior, new rules, and how to live the Jim Crow life. It was presumed that we black boys took their nakedness for granted, and that it startled us no more than a blue vase or a red rug. Our presence awoke in them no sense of shame whatever, for we blacks were not considered human anyway. If they were alone, I would steal sidelong glances at them, but if they were receiving men, not a flicker of my eyelids would show. A huge snow-skinned blonde took a room on my floor. One night she rang for service, and I went to wait upon her. She was in bed with a thick-set man. Both were nude and uncovered. She said that she wanted some liquor and slid out of bed and waddled across the floor to get her money from the dresser drawer. Without realizing it, I watched her. "Nigga, what in the hell you looking at?" the white man asked, raising himself upon his elbows. "Nothing, sir," I answered, looking suddenly miles deep into the blank wall of the room. "Keep your eyes where they belong if you want to be healthy." "Yes, sir." I would have continued at the hotel until I left had not a shortcut presented itself. One of the boys at the hotel whispered to me one night that the only local Negro movie house wanted a boy to take tickets at the door. "You ain't never been to jail, is you?" he asked me. "Not yet," I answered. "Then you can get the job," he said. "I take it, but I done 6 months and they know me." "What's the catch?" "The girl who sells tickets is using a system," he explained. "If you get the job, you can make some good gravy." If I stole, I would have a chance to head northward quickly. If I remained barely honest, piddling with pints of bootleg liquor, I merely prolonged my stay, increased my chances of being caught, exposed myself to the possibility of saying the wrong word or doing the wrong thing or paying a penalty that I dared not think of. The temptation to venture into crime was too strong, and I decided to work quickly, taking whatever was in sight, amass a wad of money, and flee. I knew that others had tried it before me and had failed, but I was hoping to be lucky. My chances for getting the job were good. I had no past record of stealing or violating the laws. When I presented myself to the Jewish proprietor of the movie house, I was immediately accepted. The next day, I reported for duty and began taking tickets. The boss man warned me. "Now, look, I'll be honest with you if you'll be honest with me. I don't know who's honest around this joint and who isn't, but if you are honest, then the rest are bound to be. All tickets will pass through your hands. There can be no stealing unless you steal." I gave him a pledge of my honesty, feeling absolutely no qualms about what I intended to do. He was white, and I could never do to him what he and his kind had done to me. Therefore, I reasoned, stealing was not a violation of my ethics, but of his. I felt that things were rigged in his favor, and any action I took to circumvent his scheme of life was justified. Yet I had not convinced myself. During the first afternoon, the Negro girl in the ticket office watched me closely, and I knew that she was sizing me up, trying to determine when it would be safe to break me into her graft. I waited, leaving it to her to make the first move. I was supposed to drop each ticket that I took from a customer into a metal receptacle. Officially, the boss would go to the ticket window and look at the serial number on the roll of unsold tickets and then compare that number with the number on the last ticket I had dropped into the receptacle. The boss continued his watchfulness for a few days, then began to observe me from across the street. Finally, he absented himself for long intervals. Attention as high as that I had known when the white men had driven me from the job at the obstetrician's returned to live in me. But I had learned to master a great deal of tension now. I had developed, slowly and painfully, a capacity to contain it within myself without betraying it in any way. Had this not been true, the mere thought of stealing, the risk involved, the inner distress would have so upset me that I would have been in no state of mind to calculate coldly, would have made me so panicky that I would have been afraid to steal at all. But my inner resistance had been blasted. I felt that I had been emotionally cast out of the world, had been made to live outside the normal process of life, had been conditioned in feeling against something daily, had become accustomed to living on the side of those who watched and waited. While I was eating supper in a nearby cafe one night, a strange Negro man walked in and sat beside me. "Hello, Richard," he said. "Hello," I said. "I don't think I know you." "But I know you," he said, smiling. "Was he one of the boss's spies?" Excuse me. Hold on. Ooh, good old agua. "Was he one of the boss's spies?" "How do you know me?" I asked. "I'm Tails' friend," he said, naming the girl who sold the tickets at the movie. I looked at him searchingly. Was he telling me the truth, or was he trying to trap me for the boss? I was already thinking and feeling like a criminal, distrusting everybody. "We start tonight," he said. "What?" I asked, still not admitting that I knew what he was talking about. "Don't be scared. The boss trusts you. He gone to see some friends. Somebody's watching him, and if he starts back to the movie, they'll phone us," he said. I could not eat my food. It lay cold upon the plate, and sweat ran down from my armpits. "It'll work this way," he explained in a low, smooth tone. "A guy'll come to you and ask for a match. You give him 5 tickets that you'll hold out of the box. See? We'll give you the signal when to start holding out. The guy'll get the tickets to Tails. She'll resell them all at once when a crowd is buying at the rush hour. You get it?" I did not answer. I knew that if I were caught, I would go to the chain gang. But was not my life already a kind of chain gang? What really did I have to lose? "Are you with us?" he asked. I still did not answer. He rose and clapped me on the shoulder and left. I trembled as I went back to the theater. Anything might happen, but I was used to that. Had I not felt that same sensation when I lay on the ground and the white man towered over me, telling me that I was a lucky nigger? Had I not felt it when I walked home from the optical company that morning with my job gone? Had I not felt it when I walked down the hallway of the hotel with the night watchman pointing a gun at my back? Had I not felt it 1,000,000 times before? I took the tickets with sweaty fingers. I waited. I was gambling. Freedom or the chain gang. There were times when I felt that I could not breathe. I looked up and down the street. The boss was not in sight. Was this a trap? If it were, I would disgrace my family. Would not all of them say that my attitude had been leading to this all along? Would they not rake up the past and find clues that had led to my fate? The man I had met in the cafe came through the door and put a ticket in my hand. "There's a crowd at the box office," he whispered. "Save 10, not 5. Start with this one." Well, here goes, I thought. He gave me a ticket and sat looking at the moving shadows upon the screen. I held on to the ticket, and my body grew tense, hot as fire, but I was used to that too. Time crawled through the cells of my brain. My muscles ached. I discovered that crime means suffering. The crowd came in and gave me more tickets. I kept 10 of them tucked in my moist palm. No sooner had the crowd thinned than a black boy with a cigarette jutting from his mouth came up to me. "Got a match?" With a slow movement, I gave him the tickets. He went out, and I kept the door cracked and watched. He went to the ticket office and laid down the coin. I saw him flip the tickets to the girl. Yes, the boy was honest. The girl shot me a quick smile, and I went back inside. A few moments later, the same tickets were handed to me by other customers. We worked it for a week, and after the money was split 4 ways, I had $50. Freedom was almost within my grasp. Ought I risk more? Ought I risk any more? I dropped the hint to Tails' friend that maybe I would quit. It was a casual hint to test him out. He grew violently angry, and I quickly consented to stay, fearing that someone might turn me in for revenge or to get me out the way so that another and more pliable boy could have my place. I was dealing with cagey people, and I would be cagey. I went through another week. Late one night, I resolved to make that week the last. The gun in the neighbor's house came to my mind, and the cans of fruit preserves in the storehouse of the college. If I stole them and sold them, I would have enough to tide me over in Memphis until I could get a job, work, save, and go north. I crept from bed and found the neighbor's house empty. I looked about. All was quiet. My heart beat so fast that it ached. I forced a window with a screwdriver and entered and took the gun. I slipped it in my shirt and returned home. When I took it out to look at it, it was wet with sweat. I pawned it under an assumed name. The following night, I rounded up 2 boys whom I knew to be ready for adventure. We broke into the college storehouse and lugged out cans of fruit preserves and sold them to restaurants. Meanwhile, I bought clothes, shoes, a cardboard suitcase, all of which I hid at home. Saturday night came, and I sent word to the boss that I was sick. Uncle Tom was upstairs. Granny and Aunt Addie were at church. My brother was sleeping. My mother sat in her rocking chair, humming to herself. I packed my suitcase and went to her. "Mama, I'm going away," I whispered. "Oh, no," she protested. "I've got to, Mama. I can't live this way." "You're not running away from something you've done." "I'll send for you, Mama. I'll be all right." "Take care of yourself and send for me quickly. I'm not happy here," she said. "I'm sorry for all these long years, Mama, but I could not have helped it." I kissed her, and she cried. Remember, his mother is she had a stroke, so she's been paralyzed for a long time. But I'm sorry for all these long years, Mama. And he only 17. This is his first round of jobs. But I could not have helped it. I kissed her and she cried. "Be quiet, Mama. I'm all right." I went out the back way and walked a quarter of a mile to the railroad tracks. It began to rain as I tramped down the cross ties toward town. I reached the station, soaked to the skin. I bought my ticket, then went hurriedly to the corner of the block in which the movie house stood. Yes, the boss was there, taking the tickets himself. I returned to the station and waited for my train, my eyes watching the crowd. An hour later, I was sitting in a Jim Crow coach, speeding northward, making the first lap of my journey to the land where I could live with a little less fear. Slowly, the burden I had carried for many months lifted somewhat. My cheeks itched, and when I scratched them, I found tears. In that moment, I understood the pain that accompanied crime, and I hoped that I would never have to feel it again. I never did feel it again, for I never stole again. And what kept me from it was the knowledge that, for me, crime carried its own punishment. Well, it's my life, I told myself. I see now what I can make of it. So that's chapter 10 of Black Boy by Richard Wright. Getting really good. Yes, I agree with you, Brother J Junior Bay. He is definitely trying to find himself, trying to find his manhood, trying to understand his place in the southern white Jim Crow South, and trying to live his truth. And so he's having all these experiences that are help shaping him into a man. I really love how this time period was like before the wave of technology and access to cell phones and stuff. Like, brothers, everybody really had to hustle. Like, you had to, like, this is his first time stealing, but he's stealing and then selling peaches to, stores or something like that. Like, who does that? Like, when it was coming time for him in earlier chapters, look for other jobs, and even when he moves to Memphis, I don't want to give it away, but he pretty much goes in these places and looks for jobs, or he sees what's in the paper and go gets it. It wasn't no whole, I gotta sit on the phone or, send in the resume and all that. You had to go for what you wanted. So, I do kind of appreciate that drive that we once had to, like, go for hours. But yeah, so I will be tuning in. Thank you guys for tuning in. I will be reading chapter 11 very soon, but I hope you all enjoyed it. So peace, love, and light.